To appeal to a more family-friendly audience, the 5th generation era of consoles, most notably encompassed by the Sony PlayStation and Nintendo 64, were marked by mascot platformers. This would carry into the next generation with such consoles as the PlayStation 2, Nintendo GameCube, and the Xbox from newcomer Microsoft. With the Spyro trilogy, Insomniac Games was no stranger to the genre, but their leap to the PlayStation 2, not without its own growing pains, was going to be a big one. Taking what they had learned, CEO and founder Ted Price and the ever-growing team of developers in Burbank, California would bring a new mascot duo to the PlayStation's ever-growing library of characters. But changing tides in gaming tastes and trends would put a threat to all of it. It was 2001, the PlayStation 2 was already on the market, and Insomniac Games had just cancelled their planned title for the new system. While huge projects from other developers were on the horizon, the anticipated next game from the people behind Spyro the Dragon was still in the planning stages. Insomniac's chief creative officer, Brian Hastings, brought up the idea of an alien creature who traversed various planets collecting gadgets and weapons. With publisher Sony Computer Entertainment's full support, it was off to the races for what would become Insomniac's most notable franchise. After the woes that was Insomniac's previous attempt at a PlayStation 2 title, known as Girl with the Stick, the excitement behind this new sci-fi concept was the jolt the team needed. Concepts from Spyro, along with the abandoned ideas of Monster Knight and Girl with the Stick, would inspire the wide-open vistas of Insomniac's new game's various planets. The alien creature at the center of the story, originally a reptile-like animal, was now a Lombax, a furry-tailed, pointy-eared anthropomorphic fox thing that ran on 2 legs. His robot sidekick too went through various designs, once acting as a Swiss Army knife of gadgets for the Lombax to use, even being a team of robots at one point. Focusing in on the idea of innocence, at one point the robot was even envisioned as a young playmate for the main character. Eventually, both characters' designs were fully formed after fast iterations in their design. Ratchet and Clank were born.
It felt like a breath of fresh air. It was great to get back to doing more mascot-based platform-type games where our imagination could just run wild. Anything could happen.
The real hook for the team was the idea of weapons and gadgets as the primary collectibles. This, coupled with a desire to move away from strictly mascot platformers, led to an exciting period of creativity and brainstorming at Insomniac. The third-person shooter genre didn't fully exist yet. Insomniac was creating something entirely new. The mascot platformer crossed over with the big action of a shooter. Ditching the fully fantastical floating isles of the Spyro games, Insomniac set out to create a world, while still filled with sci-fi splendor and wonders not seen in the natural world, that was grounded in its own sense of reality. Buildings weren't just floating in colorful abysses. They were tangible and had roots and sprouted from the ground. With the immense new power of the PlayStation 2, Insomniac's own efforts in developing their own engine, along with shared tech and rendering techniques with close development neighbors Naughty Dog, the brand new locations across this new title had the ability to truly come alive in a way not seen in gaming before. It was a technical marvel. Not least of all from this period was the incredible amount of ideas Insomniac had for the arsenal of weapons Ratchet would gather throughout his adventure. While always having a trusty wrench to bash enemies and objects with, a signifier of Ratchet's small-time mechanic beginnings, the team threw out absolutely ridiculous ideas for ways for Ratchet to fight. A giant boxing glove that walloped enemies, a flamethrower that scorched them to ash, a decoy weapon that would toss out silly inflatable Ratchets, a disco ball that could cause enemies to stop what they're doing for an impromptu dance break. Some made the cut, and some would have to wait a bit longer to see the light of day. After the problems with Girl with the Stick, the development of Insomniac's new 5th title, now officially titled Ratchet & Clank, progressed quickly and smoothly, with the goal of releasing the game for the holidays in 2002, 2 years after the launch of the PlayStation 2 console. The bigger focus on narrative would be a major factor in the game as well. While aiming at an older, more mature audience, Insomniac still sought to keep an atmosphere and tone of fun from the characters, now fleshed fleshing out to include various other alien creatures like Big Owl, a typical science geek, to Captain Quark, a well-known intergalactic superhero who Ratchet looks up to that may have a bit of an ego problem. While not an especially in-depth tale, Insomniac sought to set the groundwork for a fully lived-in universe. Literally, with dozens of different alien species and biomes populating across a bunch of different levels. It was ambitious, to say the least. The real hook was creating the relationship between Ratchet and Clank themselves. Ratchet was written to be a bit of a hothead, the attitude of a teen who just wants to get out of his small town and see the world and go on adventures. Clank, on the other hand, contrasted Ratchet by being the more even-tempered of the two, having a strong sense of intelligence while still being a bit naive to the world around him. A sort of buddy cop dynamic was formed, hopefully endearing players to the duo and empathizing with them. The story, as created by the team at Insomniac, goes that Ratchet, a mechanic on his home world of Veldin, discovers Clank after the robot crash lands nearby. Clank reveals that he's on a mission to stop the villainous business tycoon Chairman Drek from destroying dozens of populated planets to harvest their resources to create a new, perfect home for the Blarg. Ratchet and Clank seek out Captain Quark, a superhero and an egotistical celebrity, to take on and defeat Drek. But unfortunately, the hero Ratchet looked up to betrays the duo and reveals he's been working for Drek the whole entire time, having been promised a lucrative spokesman deal for the soon-to-be-completed new planet. As Drek sends every soldier he's got to take out the Lombax and robot, eventually Ratchet learns that Veldin, his home, is the next planet on the chopping block for Drek and his deplanetizer device. While collecting various weapons and gadgets and making new friends and allies while participating in a hoverboard race or two, Ratchet and Clank work to free the Blarg-captured planets as they eventually reach a final showdown with Drek back on Veldin. Drek reveals that he polluted the Blarg's original planet to make it uninhabitable, setting his evil plot in full motion. He plans to follow through with creating a new Blarg homeworld, but intends to pollute the new one again so he can maximize profits and keep creating new planets while destroying hundreds in the process just to line his pockets. After an intense fight, Drek is defeated as he's destroyed along with the new Blarg planet with his deplanetizer. Clank is injured in the struggle, and after the dust settles, Ratchet takes him home to fix him up, as the pair become true friends. Moment-to-moment gameplay achieved what Insomniac was going for. They were no longer just a platformer game developer. Platforming still was an important part of Ratchet and Clank, but the addition of gadgets along with the more puzzle-focused segments, where players controlled Clank on his own, created a hybrid genre experience that was brand new to video games. Ratchet himself had all the hallmarks of a platforming character. He could run, jump, do a basic melee attack, and the new addition for Insomniac, shooting. The endless list of weapons and gadgets were eventually narrowed down to a still sizable 36. There was even extra content included, where once players completed the game's story, a new challenge mode would be unlocked that increased the game's difficulty but allowed players to keep all of their weapons and upgrades from their previous playthrough. While the struggle to get to the final concept was an arduous process, Ratchet & Clank proved a critical and commercial success for Insomniac when it released in November of 2002. Critics praised the graphics, vibrant worlds, and varied gameplay of the title, even winning several awards for its visuals from various publications. While reception was universally positive, some criticisms were lobbed at the characterization of Ratchet himself. The voice acting of Ratchet, played by Mikey Kelly, and Clank, voiced by David Kay, were generally praised, but some felt that Ratchet's cocky, immature attitude made the character unlikable, and that Ratchet and Clank didn't come off as characters that actually wanted to be around each other.
I would devour courses like that for breakfast!
Bet that's not all.
Blast it!
Look, plumber's crack.
What did you just say?
Nerd.
I like him.
This isn't the real Captain Quark, you numbskull. It's a robot. We saw you, screaming for help.
I am unsure about your logic.
You think too much. Come on, let's go.
The story was also criticized for being a bit bland and slow to get going. Insomniac was still new to telling more in-depth stories in their games, so the comments and the characters were taken to heart. Develop your heroes and their relationships. If the audience doesn't care about them, they won't care about your world. Even with these cons, it was full steam ahead for Insomniac Games. Ratchet & Clank sold over 1 million copies, and a brand new franchise for Insomniac and PlayStation as a brand was solidified in gaming culture. With success, Insomniac grew as a team, growing from a small team of 32 by the time the development of their next title, over 100. Ratchet & Clank was a cash cow, and the next step was to create a sequel, one that would release just over a year after the 2002 original. The chance to do a sequel in the video games industry is a ripe one. After building a solid foundation in the first game, Insomniac now could take what worked and what didn't and refine everything, from graphics to gameplay to characters to story. The main ethos for the sequel's development was to broaden the scope of every aspect of the title. More RPG-like progression, more variety in its environments, along with bigger levels and worlds. Even more story-driven. It was all to reach a goal of making an even better game that was completely different than anything else on the PlayStation 2, or any console for that matter. Additions to the sequel included more refined shooting controls, as Ratchet could now strafe side to side, while adding in other mini-games and puzzles like space combat and gameplay segments where you got to play as a kaiju-sized Clank. Additional new challenges like gladiator arena fights, an idea carried over from Girl with the Stick, were included along with hover bike racing. Ideas from the first game that didn't make it in originally, like explorable spherical worlds, were added in for new variety to the game's already extremely varied environments. These bonus areas were dubbed maxi games by the team, as just calling them mini-games seemed to write them off as mere diversions. The spherical worlds were a new development hurdle for Insomniac as well, as the levels had to function in a specific size that wasn't too big or too small, along with having its own type of physics with the naturally lower gravity of the smaller planets. This bled into the combat and weapons, with all of them having to function with all of these modifications, coded primarily by Peter Hastings. Ratchet's character was recalibrated to be more likable, and he was recast with actor James Arnold Taylor taking over the role.
We have to get to the moon base to find Quark. If Drek is there, Quark is probably with him. You did great. Now, let's go get that experiment back.
The weapons became more of a priority too. An RPG-like leveling system was added to each weapon, with more than a dozen new weapons added, placing more emphasis on the shooting gameplay. Returning weapons from the original Ratchet & Clank could also be obtained for free from the in-game weapons vendor if players had a save file from the original on their memory card. Ratchet could now also upgrade to new armor sets, increasing his defense as well as refining the upgrade system for nanotech, Ratchet's health. The storytelling became even more of a focus as well. Insomniac still did not have a dedicated writer position on the team for writing the game's numerous cutscenes. As such, Oliver Wade, lead animator on the game, served as the primary writer for the game's story. This time around, Ratchet & Clank have become celebrities after the defeat of Chairman Drek. Because of their new fame, the duo are recruited by Abercrombie Fizzwidget, the CEO of the company Megacorp, to hunt down a mysterious thief who has stolen the company's biological experiment for unknown reasons. Ratchet & Clank agree to help and are transported to the Bogon Galaxy to aid the company and its founder. In pursuit of the thief, Ratchet has to deal with the mercenary organization Thugs for Less, who have been hired by the thief to stop them. They eventually catch up to the thief and get the experiment back. However, upon returning it to Fizzwidget, the CEO promptly and accidentally dumps the duo in the desert.
How about a little flying music?
Where they discover that the thief is in fact another Lombax named Angela Cross. Angela tells them that she was once an employee of Megacorp, who quit when they started pushing for the experiment, a thing she claims to be a threat to the galaxy at large, to be released en masse as Megacorp's next big product. The duo head to a testing facility that features video footage of the experiment becoming extremely violent and dangerous, attacking Megacorp scientists.
Our surviving staff recommend that the experiment be destroyed immediately at Megacorp's deep space disposal facility.
Soon after, they, along with new ally Angela, have learned that Megacorp is duplicating and is about to sell the experiment, now known as a protopet. Believing Fizzwidget to be unaware of the protopet's danger, Ratchet attempts to get in contact with the CEO, only to be slowed down by Thugs for Less, now working for Megacorp. Angela is captured, and Ratchet & Clank discover that Abercrombie Fizzwidget is none other than Captain Quark in disguise, having kidnapped the real Fizzwidget and installed himself in disguise as CEO in order to intentionally unleash the threat of the protopet on the galaxy, and then save the day as Quark, restoring his reputation after working with Drek. However, Quark's attempts to set the original protopet berserk backfires, causing the creature to grow to gargantuan size and promptly eat him.
Mommy!
An epic fight with the giant protopet ensues, and once it's defeated, Ratchet & Clank save Quark's life, and Angela recovers the real Fizzwidget along with stopping the already unleashed protopets from causing any more havoc. The duo settle down in a new apartment in the Bogon Galaxy, and Quark faces punishment by becoming the new test subject for Megacorp's upcoming product, the Crotchetizer.
Oh, one more thing!
Simply put, the sequel was even better received upon its release than the original. The game was officially titled Ratchet & Clank Going Commando, setting a precedent of innuendo-filled titles throughout the series' run.
When they pitched Going Commando to me, I didn't know what that meant. I was like, sounds good, okay.
Going Commando was critically acclaimed for taking everything that worked in the first and just making it all work even better. Insomniac had struck lightning. Again. Just a year later. Turning a new game around in such a small period of time was a gargantuan task. But at this point, Insomniac Games had truly become a household name, allowing the hiring of dozens of new employees to handle the new workload. What had started as Ted Price's dream to make console games had reached its fruition. Insomniac was now one of the biggest names in console gaming. The train didn't stop there. Not at all. With the even greater success of Going Commando, critics praising the refined gameplay, story, characters, and maxi games, it was time to develop a third game in the Ratchet Clank series, turning it into a trilogy. However, there was the definite fear from Insomniac of gameplay growing stale. After 2 successful games, the Ratchet & Clank gameplay formula worked like a charm, but there was always different ways to refine the experience even further. With the third title in the series, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal, Insomniac sought to amplify what truly stood out with the series from the rest of the pack, and that was, well, the arsenal. Starting out, Ratchet & Clank was a platforming game with shooting. By the time development was well underway with the third title, the series had grown into a shooter with platforming. The focus had shifted. With Up Your Arsenal, the Ratchet & Clank series fully embraced the mechanics of a third-person shooter, adding in new features like a more open level design featuring big battlefields with various tactical objectives, and even a new lock-strafe control scheme option to further emphasize the shooting. Up Your Arsenal would also add online multiplayer for the first time to the series, developed by its own small team within Insomniac, featuring various online modes like Capture the Flag, Siege, and Deathmatch, with up to 8 players online with voice chat. These modes could also be played offline as well. But online gaming was a whole new world for Insomniac. The single-player experience maintained the series' high pedigree as well. The weapon and gadget selection expanded even more with more upgradable levels and modifications to the player's arsenal. More new maxi games were added as well, most notably side-scrolling platforming segments, where players controlled the comic book version of Captain Quark as he hopped around short levels revealing his history as a superhero. Clank gameplay sections returned as well, but as Insomniac viewed the usual Gadgetbots Clank ordered around to be a bit less interesting on a third go-around, the mutant monkey Scrunch was added to liven up these sections, with the included and delightful Banana Gun. Up Your Arsenal also saw a significant step for Insomniac as developers, as instead of using outside software like Autodesk Maya, a 3D computer graphics application, for their level editors, they instead developed their own internal level editing tool to rely on instead. This, along with now being completely comfortable with the PlayStation 2 as a system, meant levels could be even more diverse and large compared to the already sizable, lush locations of Going Commando. Cutscenes became more elaborate as well, with a music video of in-universe pop star Courtney Gears being more visually complex than anything Insomniac had done before.
This goes out to all you robots across the galaxy. It's time for you and me to rise up and strike back. Don't stop until we dominate. Won't you feel great when we exterminate all organic life?
Story-wise, Up Your Arsenal would too set another high watermark for the series. Previous Ratchet & Clank games were written by the animators and programmers, but the third title in the series would see the hiring of an actual dedicated writer, Brad Santos. While relaxing in their new home in the Bogon Galaxy, Ratchet receives word that his home planet, Veldin, is under attack by the alien race known as the Tyrannoids. The villain behind this is a maniacal robot scientist known as Dr. Nefarious, a debatable genius who has a penchant for breaking down when enraged, triggering a soap opera to broadcast out of his head.
Oh, Janice, you'll always be the love of my life.
You really should have that looked at.
Ratchet and Clank join an elite force known as the Galactic Rangers to take on this new threat, and their first mission leads them to seeking out Captain Quark, the only person to have defeated Nefarious before. The Rangers act as a sort of reunion for previous side characters from previous games like the nerdy Big Al and the hoverboarder Skid McMarks, along with new characters such as the Ranger Captain Sasha. It turns out Dr. Nefarious's big, evil plan is to turn squishies, that is, organic beings, into robots with his super weapon known as the Bio-Obliterator. Nefarious isn't alone with his anti-squishy sentiments. He also recruits such characters like Courtney Gears, and a parody sent up to then-current pop star sensation Britney Spears to produce music videos continuing propaganda for fellow robots to fight back and destroy
Organic life.
Using Clank's fame as he has recently been starring in a TV series known as Secret Agent Clank, the duo arrange a meeting with Gears only for Clank to be kidnapped. The Rangers suffer more blows when one of their own, Skid McMarks, is turned into a robot.
Like destroy all squishies, dude.
The Starship Phoenix, the Ranger's ship, is attacked, and while most everyone escapes, Quark chooses to stay behind trying to allegedly gather intel, and seemingly dies when the ship is destroyed. The Tyrannoids invade various planets, including the bustling city of Metropolis, as the Bio-Obliterator is activated, turning the Tyrannoids and the Metropolis population into robots. Ratchet recovers Clank from Nefarious after having to fight an evil Clank doppelganger known as Clunk, and unsurprisingly discovers that Quark had faked his death to get out of fighting Nefarious because of his own cowardice. Roping Quark back in, Ratchet and Clank infiltrate the Bio-Obliterator and destroy it, only to discover a second Bio-Obliterator has already been produced and is ready to go on the attack. Finally confronting Nefarious with the actual help of Quark for once, Ratchet and Clank destroy the second weapon and Nefarious loses, transporting himself and his sarcastic butler Lawrence to a distant asteroid where they can't bother anyone ever again. Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal, alternatively titled simply Ratchet & Clank 3 in Europe and Japan, would continue the critical and commercial success of previous titles, with the third game being the highest reviewed and highest selling in the series when it released again just a year later after going commando in November 2004. Praise was given for the stylized visuals as the worlds and characters became more detailed and vast, pushing the PlayStation 2 to its absolute limits. The pivot to more shooter-based gameplay and multiplayer was also lauded, along with a strong story and very funny script.
She always seems so sweet and innocent in her videos. Well, except for that one with the... you know...
The Ratchet universe may have been a bit slight in the original game, but Insomniac had listened to fans and had crafted a cast and setting that could be easily invested in, creating some of the most fun storytelling and writing in gaming for that generation of consoles. The music too by composer David Bergeau was praised, having crafted themes for all three Ratchet games up to this point that were catchy, fun, and wonderfully integrated into the game. It paid off too that Up Your Arsenal was the most complex Ratchet title to date, featuring even more gameplay styles than Going Commando, along with the return of fan-favorite features like the Battle Arena. The storytelling was more complex and further integrated with the gameplay, notably using the Starship Phoenix as a primary hub for going to various levels, and also featuring training courses, vendors, large rooms that allowed players to really feel like they're on an elite starship, and even a bridge where players could listen to the now large cast of characters converse. Releasing to such strong sales and reviews, where was Insomniac to go from here? Like Spyro before it, they had completed an acclaimed trilogy over the course of just 3 years, an almost insurmountable task that could only be completed by the enormous effort and ingenuity of the Insomniac team. So that was it. Like Spyro before it, Insomniac had said what they had wanted to say with Ratchet & Clank by the end of Up Your Arsenal. They had found the winning formula, the ethos of the series: beautiful stylized visuals, fun relatable characters, imaginative weapons, exploration, and a balance between shooting and platforming. But with the want for a fourth entry in the series, how could they avoid franchise fatigue? 3 entries in 3 years is a lot, and a fourth, again, just 1 year later, might be less than well received. Insomniac began to look at the gaming industry at large. What if they went with a more open world mission structure like the Jak and Daxter series? Or maybe go really open world like Grand Theft Auto? From this research, Insomniac turned their gaze at the ongoing Halo series, which had released Halo 2 in 2004 for the Microsoft Xbox to enormous success. There was a sci-fi series that took itself more seriously, had darker storytelling, fun co-op multiplayer, and an eclectic set of weapons that was adored by fans and critics. Insomniac had the philosophy of adapt or die. Listen to what the people want, refine the games to those expectations, and succeed. If not, failure. Insomniac's first idea for a fourth game was known as Ratchet & Clank Nexus. The idea was that Ratchet & Clank would find themselves on a single planet for the entire game as they dealt with an intense war between 2 alien races as the duo see each side of the conflict. The concept never made it past the early stages, and the idea of a single planet for an entire game would be shelved for a potential later title. Instead, the fourth entry in the Ratchet & Clank series would go dark. Ratchet Deadlocked would mark quite the departure for the series. Designs were harsher and more intense, with emphasis on more moody, dramatic levels. Gone were the double entendres, and even Clank was dropped from the game's title entirely. Whereas previous games had a balance of shooting and platforming, Deadlocked would take the more open mission-based gameplay that popped up in Up Your Arsenal and make it the entire focus, with emphasis on action shooter gameplay for the absolute majority, along with various fighter vehicles as players completed various mission-based objectives on grimmer, more mechanical-looking locations. Clank was also no longer playable, serving as the guy in the chair for Ratchet, communicating with him over intercom to aid him in his journey. Quark was also removed too, with less focus on comedy and more on higher stakes and darker storytelling, as Ratchet found himself trapped in a gladiator game show called Dread Zone. Comply and Compete, or the explosive collar around his neck, along with Clank and returning character Big Al, would explode, killing them. It was definitely a more intense story, as Ratchet had to fight his way through Dread Zone as various heroic figures are kidnapped and forced to fight to the death by the creator of the show, Gleeman Vox.
Time for some real action. It's time to blow it up!
Ratchet's success in Dread Zone leads to the previous star of the show, washed-up hero turned murderous gladiator Ace Hardlight, becoming jealous and wanting to take him out. Ratchet, however, defeats Ace, receiving one final warning from the former hero to not let Vox get his claws into him. Upon meeting with Vox, the conniving creator attempts to sway Ratchet to join him with swanky merchandise deals, becoming the new star of Dread Zone. When Ratchet refuses, Vox forces him to participate in an arena challenge that has killed everyone sent to it. Ratchet thankfully survives. At the same time, Clank works on a way to free them from Dread Zone. As a last resort to end Ratchet's life, Vox decides to destroy the Dread Zone facility with explosives. But with the help of Clank's knowledge of the station, Ratchet is able to stop the detonators and activate the facility's escape shuttles, enabling everyone to make it out alive. With no pods left, however, Ratchet is stranded with Vox, who manually activates the self-destruct. If he's going down, he's going to take Ratchet with him. Thankfully, Al and Clank are able to swoop in at the last minute and rescue Ratchet, leaving Gleeman Vox to perish and shut down Dread Zone for good. It was an intriguing story that was received fairly well, but Ratchet Deadlocked, while still a commercial success, was less of a critical one compared to the previous 3 games. Reviews were still positive with praise towards new elements like the co-op multiplayer, but many felt that while the game was very good, it just didn't feel like a great Ratchet & Clank game. Gone were the imaginative weapons, traded in for more generic ones with a lot of customization options, the most in the series to date. Clank was absent from much of the story, removing the fun buddy dynamic. Worlds were no longer about exploration, but instead about completing various objectives and going from point A to point B in big battlefields with loads of enemies. The humor was still there, but the darker story muted it to an extent, and in turn, the fun. Insomniac looked at the reception and saw they had made a mistake. They had moved the needle and adapted the Ratchet formula, but maybe they had moved the needle a little too far. Ratchet Deadlocked would be Ratchet's and Insomniac's final game on the PS2. While the early goings in the system proved difficult with the shelving of Girl with a Stick, Insomniac never could have expected the gold they would strike with Ratchet & Clank. After a delayed debut on the PlayStation 2, Insomniac created 4 complete games in the series over the course of 4 years. A series run by one developer in such rapid succession that it's unheard of to this day. And while Deadlocked made the series' system swan song a bit more muted than intended, what a run it had been. After 4 years, Insomniac had crafted a beast of a franchise. Not only were there now 4 core games, but Ratchet & Clank had spun off as a mobile title for phones, aptly named Ratchet & Clank Going Mobile. Ratchet was also a hit in Japan, where a manga series based on the games, translated as a Ratchet & Clank Bang 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 Critical Danger of the Galaxy Legend, was launched and serialized in Japan's Koro Koro comic in 2004. The series was a big moneymaker for Insomniac and publisher Sony, with quality to back it up. Not only that, but Ratchet & Clank were now in the pantheon of iconic Sony gaming characters, and Insomniac's second too after Spyro on the original PlayStation. Even if Deadlocked was a slight misstep, the series would continue. Fans cared about these characters and this world, and really they couldn't get enough of it. Franchise fatigue was always a concern, but Insomniac's adapt or die mentality allowed for the series to pivot with each entry and maintain a sense of freshness that was unrivaled in the industry. Even if changes didn't always ring completely true, they allowed Ratchet & Clank as a series to stay in the minds of gamers around the globe. However, changes were afoot at Insomniac. What was once a small team of developers had now grown to an absolutely enormous group, a team that could now develop multiple titles in parallel instead of focusing on just one at a time. While a team toiled away on Ratchet Deadlocked, another team set their sights on a new horizon, the Sony PlayStation 3. The Sony gaming brand was making the jump to high definition, and Insomniac wanted to be ready at launch this time instead of having a game arrive 2 years after the new console's release. This new team would work on a darker, more mature title in a genre Insomniac hadn't touched since their very first game as a company, the first-person shooter. But after Deadlock's completion and the other development team working on what would become the PlayStation 3 launch title Resistance Fall of Man, what of the Lombax? What could be next for Ratchet & Clank? Well, it was back to basics for the dynamic duo, as Insomniac made the decision to pivot back away from the darker, more shooter-focused gameplay and return to what fans loved about the series originally. But still, adapt or die. What could be done to make a new Ratchet & Clank game on a brand new console feel fresh and new and not completely derivative of the past? A return to the platforming shooter roots was in order, with an eclectic cast, the return of Quark, and even more wacky and imaginative weapons. For instance, what about that disco ball weapon that never got implemented into the PlayStation 2 games? And also, what the heck was a Lombax really anyway? With the focus on Resistance, after 2005, 2006 would be the first year since 2002 without a Ratchet & Clank game released by Insomniac. Fans were left to wonder if the franchise was truly over, if Ratchet & Clank was to be left behind on the PlayStation 2, like its fellow platformers of the time like Jak and Daxter and Sly Cooper, as teams moved on to more mature projects like Uncharted and Infamous. However, with a jaw-dropping tech showcase debuted at the 2006 Game Developers Conference in San Francisco, California, Insomniac made it clear that Ratchet & Clank's adventures were only just beginning.